What is up, guys? Tomcat here, and I wanted to check in with you guys on the M3, because if you follow me on Instagram, you will have seen the post that I made last night about the M3 getting loaded onto a tow truck. Now, I want to go ahead and go over what happened and what, if you're... It's actually a really interesting thing, because I had heard of this issue happening with certain E46 M3s, and I understood that there would be some issues with this car going into it, so I'm not insanely surprised that it happened, but I will say the actual part that freaked me out was a little weird. So I'll explain to you guys what happened, and then I'll show you guys a couple of the clips that I was able to take that night. So I was on my way to go meet up with a friend, so I'm just kind of rolling down the highway, rolling down 85, and I'm cruising at probably, I don't know, like about 70 miles an hour, and we go to get off the highway, and as I'm merging, the battery light comes on, like the battery and alternator light comes on, and the steering tightens up a ton. So I'm like, okay, that's weird, right? That's weird. But I'm thinking, okay, so something went wrong somewhere. I'll get it off the highway and I'll see what happened. So the closer I get to the exit, which is basically up at the top of a hill, and you would make a right, there's a glowing red light on the bottom right-hand side of the dash. I'm like, that's not good. So I look down to the bottom right-hand side of the dash, and sure enough, the temperature gauge is pegged in the red. So I limp off the highway into a little gas station, which, by the way, is closed at this point. So it's just this, closed, quiet gas station. Pull in there, shut the car off. Oh, yeah. So, let me see if the temperature gauge is still pinned, because it is, let's see, what time is it right now? I don't even know. It's like 11 o'clock at night. And yeah, forgive the fact that I'm 350 miles over my oil change. I have it scheduled, but yeah, temperature gauge is pinned, absolutely pinned. I was going down the highway, and the battery warning light came on, and then the temperature gauge pinned, which I think is, at least according to everything that I've read, basically means that the belt let go. So if you can, okay, yeah, you're gonna bring the light over here. Basically, the belt let go, and you can see right there that shred of belt. So we're gonna figure out what we're gonna do, and hopefully this doesn't happen again. And I'm looking around, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, I was freaking out, because first thought, without analyzing any of the evidence, right? First thought was oh my God, my temperature gauge is pegged out. I must have blown something. You know what I'm saying? And that was also kind of, that was also moderately compounded by the fact that E46 M3s can have head gasket problems. So that was mildly in the moment when things fly all over the place in your head, that definitely flew through my head a couple times. But basically, so the first thing I did was I was like, okay, well, you're going to be here for a while, so, why not pop the hood and see if you can figure it out? So I pop the hood, I look inside, and you can see on the E46 M3, you can see basically where the cover for the intake and then everything else up in the front of the car where the radiator is. There's a cover, bunch of plastic covers, and then behind that you can see there's basically a hole that you can see down into where the fan would be. And sure enough, I look down there and I can see shards of belt. And at that point, I knew exactly what happened. Some pulley, I don't know which one yet because we haven't dug into it and figured it out, which, by the way, it is next week. It's going into a shop, and it should be in and out pretty quickly. But basically what happened is, once I saw what had happened, I was like, okay, basically a pulley seized up and threw the belt off, and then the belt got shredded, and because, of course, when that happens, it can't turn the water pump, it can't turn the power steering pump. That would explain the steering getting heavy. It couldn't turn the alternator. That's what explained the battery and alternator light coming on. So it makes sense as to what happened, but at the same time, it was one of those things where you think, you see all these lights come on, you see the temperature gauge, bang into the red, and, you're freaking out, right? You're freaking out. You're in the middle of, a massive highway, and you're like, well, I can't drive the car home. And that's the biggest thing. It's like, there's a lot of issues that can happen with a car where, you know, you have to fix them as quickly as possible, but you can still drive the car home. And this was one of those ones where, like, if you drove the car home, if I tried to drive the car home, it could have been catastrophic, because with, you know, with it not being able to basically pump effectively and cool the engine, you could risk some explosions. You could risk a head gasket. You could risk a lot of different things. So basically, it's one of those things where I didn't want to mess with it, and it's honestly much more worth it in the long run to just have the car towed rather than to risk, you know, massive engine damage for something that really isn't that big of a deal. So. Oh, no.
Well, there's that.
Check your pulleys, because if for some reason you drive any sort of early 2000s BMW and a pulley goes, the belt goes with it immediately. And yeah, I would say check them, and if you check them and find them to be bad, change them. And it's weird that it happened at this, like, I don't know. I do find it interesting that it happened at this point, like, because the car had been fine. The car had been absolutely flawless up to this point. There had been no weirdness, no issues, no nothing like that. And then just like, boom, the belt flew off. And I'm very curious to see which pulley actually failed. I'm not sure if it was like, it could have been a tensioner pulley. It could have been the water pump pulley. Like, any one of those pulleys could have locked down and thrown the belt off. So, one of those, and whichever one it is, could mean, you know, evidence of other underlying issues. So if it's the water pump, then what we'll do is we'll probably replace the water pump and the thermostat, and, you know, do the belt, obviously, but we just want to do preventative stuff to make sure that doesn't happen. And we'll check all the other pulleys while we're in there too. But definitely the first time in a long time that any car has basically, like, I use the term stranded me, but at the same time, it's like, did it strand me in the way that I had to get it towed home? I mean, like, yes, but at the same time, you know, it wasn't necessarily one of those things where it was like the car exploded and was immobile. I mean, it drove onto the tow truck, and it drove off the tow truck, and it drove into a parking space at home, but we couldn't run it for an extended period of time. So that's one of those things you got to keep in mind. I mean, like, when a vehicle really strands you, I mean, like, back when I had my diesel truck, my lifted truck, we literally had the front drive shaft separate from the front axle, bang off the floor, wrap itself in a wiring harness, pull the wiring harness out, and basically, while the drive shaft is slamming into the floor of the truck. That's when a vehicle leaves you stranded. That's when a vehicle leaves you stranded. I mean, because we couldn't move the thing. It had to be pulled onto the tow truck. It had to be, you know, pretty much pushed off of the tow truck. And that was definitely one of those things where it was like, you know, you feel very stranded when it happens, and you definitely don't want that kind of thing to happen. But yeah, I would say, like, while we're looking through all this stuff on the M3, we'll definitely look in there to make sure there's nothing else that could go wrong. Hope you guys enjoyed this little update. If you did, don't forget to leave me a like. Tell me in the comments below what you guys thought of it. And if you're new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe for more. I'll see you guys in the next one. Talk to y'all later.